The story begins with a man feeling anxious on a train. As soon as the train stops, he rushes off and runs quickly. But a group with a secret about him captures him using smoke and combat techniques. Despite his skill in combat, evading thrown knives, and even catching metal needles with his mouth to throw them back, he's overwhelmed and captured by a machine that traps his neck. A villain then fatally wounds him with a sword, and his pursuers confirm his death before leaving. In a different setting, a farmer named Joe Huygen enjoys a peaceful life on his farm, tinkering with his motorcycle and playing games with his son, Kyle. Joe and his wife, Sarah, share lighthearted moments, even as they discuss the mythical Oni, with Joe humorously suggesting the Oni might mistake Kyle for one of them. Despite the playful atmosphere, there's an underlying tension when a news report about the man's death reaches them, hinting at the possible involvement of a feared entity, the Reaper. Joe and Sarah are concerned but try to maintain normalcy for Kyle's sake, even as the story hints at Joe's meticulous efforts to protect his family, such as wiping off fingerprints from a doorknob. The story shifts from their tranquil life to a broader mystery involving a series of mysterious deaths, suggesting a looming threat that Joe might be more connected to than it first appears. This tale weaves together suspense and domestic life, contrasting a man's violent confrontation with a family's attempt to live peacefully amidst rising dangers. The narrative hints at hidden depths and secrets within Joe's past, possibly linking him to the larger mystery of the deaths, all while showcasing the lengths to which he'll go to keep his family safe in a world that's becoming increasingly unsafe. That night, it was Joe who got out of bed, while he reassured his wife to remain there without moving. Calmly, he made his way downstairs, where everything seemed to be in order. However, unexpectedly, an entity appeared at the window, leading to Joe being assaulted. Despite the break-in by the attackers, Joe managed to fend off many of them with remarkable skill. His exceptional abilities enabled him to seize a weapon from one of them, and with his sword, he was able to eliminate several of the intruders. In the midst of his combat, the sound of his son's scream for help caught Joe's attention. Prompted by the urgency, Joe quickly dealt with another assailant who attempted to obstruct him. He hurried to secure his family's safety, although he was impeded when another attacker managed to shoot 2 metal needles through his neck. Despite the severe injury, Joe's determination did not waver, and he managed to drag himself upstairs. Overwhelmed by excruciating pain and upon noticing a peculiar figure outside, Joe reached the 2nd floor only to discover the grim fate of numerous attackers who had been defeated. The sight that struck him with horror was the lifeless bodies of Kyle and Sarah on the floor, which filled him with shock. An ominous figure remarked on the commendable resistance of Joe's wife before fatally stabbing her in the neck, which ignited fury within Joe. However, as he was about to confront the situation further, he was stabbed in the back. Even though he tried to pull the attacker towards him in a desperate attempt to reach his family, his injuries were too severe to continue. The attackers realized the police had been alerted as the sound of sirens approached, the leader verifying Joe's demise before they hastily departed just moments before the arrival of the police. Upon their arrival, the police were appalled by the tragic scene of the family that had been brutally murdered. After a period of unconsciousness, it was observed that Joe, who appeared to have succumbed to death, regained consciousness. Upon waking, his mind was immediately flooded with thoughts of his deceased family. When he next opened his eyes, Joe found himself in a hospital setting, prompting a nurse to urgently summon a doctor. With his wife's name being the only words he could muster, Joe once again lost consciousness. Upon his subsequent awakening, a doctor informed him of his miraculous recovery, stating that he had been declared dead by the coroner before showing signs of life. Joe's immediate concern, however, was for the well-being of his wife and son. To his despair, he was informed of their tragic demise. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, 2 individuals identified as Mike and Emma, who were associated with the FBI, arrived with the intention of seeking Joe's assistance in an ongoing investigation. They inquired about potential suspects involved in the attack, but Joe's response was non-verbal, though his expression of anger was evident. Mike, sensing the inopportune timing of their questions, opted to leave his contact information with Joe, discussing with Emma their suspicion that Joe might have knowledge of the attackers' identities. They agreed to alternate in observing Joe, with Emma taking the first shift. As Emma watched over Joe from a distance, a flashback revealed Joe's heart-wrenching visit to bid farewell to his family, a moment during which he was physically unable to approach their bodies, overwhelmed by fury and grief. Back in the present, on the rooftop, Joe was consumed by memories of his family, leading to a surge of anger. In an intense display of emotion, he extracted a metal needle from his wrist and used it on himself, triggering a peculiar reaction in his body. Suddenly, Joe found himself under attack by assassins. Despite the overwhelming odds, his anger transformed into a lethal force, enabling him to exhibit extraordinary strength and combat skills. Joe not only defended himself but also employed a mysterious ability to transform his body into black smoke, a tactic that proved devastating against the assailants. The narrative progresses to show Emma's confusion over the unfolding events, which Joe chooses not to clarify before incapacitating her. His rampage continued unabated, with Joe employing both conventional and mystical means to dispatch a large number of attackers, including a strategic maneuver involving a sword and an elevator shaft, showcasing his tactical acumen even when heavily outnumbered. The absence of communication from Emma alarms Mika, who is confronted by the aftermath of Joe's confrontations. Joe's encounter with the leader of the assassins reveals a deeper narrative, one of destiny and hidden truths. Despite the leader's formidable skills and the use of advanced technology, Joe's mastery of his shadow skill ultimately secures his victory. The confrontation concludes with the leader taunting Joe about his inescapable fate, a notion Joe dismisses with decisive action. Following this, Joe's journey leads him back to the place he once called home, where the memories of his family prompt a profound response. In a symbolic act of closure, Joe sets fire to his home, erasing the physical remnants of his past life. The story of Joe Higan's clan is set in Japan, known as the Land of the Rising Sun, which kept secret arts hidden from outsiders. The clan was committed to preserving peace within the country and took its responsibilities very seriously. However, due to an increase in terrorist activities, the clan found itself needing to operate under a more powerful authority outside of Japan. This shift meant that the once guarded secrets had to be disclosed to foreigners, a move deemed necessary for Japan's welfare. Those who opposed this decision faced exile and elimination. In his dreams, Joe relives the painful loss of his wife and son, waking up in distress, covered in sweat. He finds himself in a warehouse, sitting before Dread King, who is suspended upside down from a wooden ledge above him. Dread King had previously attempted to harm Joe. When Joe attempts to stand, his legs fail him, causing him to fall. At this moment, he is greeted by a cat, accompanied by the voice of an elderly man known for his deep tan, round glasses, and unique fashion sense. This man, who has a special affinity for cats, is surprised to see Joe in such a dire condition. The elderly man, who is a doctor and a friend to Joe, assists him to bed to treat his injuries while listening to Joe's heartbreaking story. Joe explains that the organization has found a way to bypass their disguise technology. He pessimistically requests the cessation of his treatment, believing it to be futile, which prompts the elderly man to express concern over Joe's consistently battered state upon their meetings. The doctor observes that Joe's arm has been severely damaged by using a forbidden technique known as stark awareness, advising against its use to avoid fatal consequences. He is puzzled by Joe's survival despite a lethal wound, suggesting luck or external intervention as possible reasons. He estimates a recovery period of 5 to 6 days, during which Joe plans to interrogate a captive. After losing consciousness again, Joe wakes to find the elderly man has left, leaving behind medicines, a backpack with essential items, and a card from someone named Mike. Joe then engages in torturing Dread King, practicing his skills but receiving only vile responses. Despite Dread King's provocations about Sarah's final moments, Joe's resolve only hardens. Joe ultimately decides to end Dread King's life in a gruesome manner, leaving his screams to echo in the warehouse before silence signifies his demise. Meanwhile, at the FBI, Mike disputes with his superior over being removed from the case. Frustrated by the lack of evidence and the directive to halt the investigation, Mike's insistence on pursuing the truth, despite warnings of potential risks before his retirement, leads him to confront Emma about her altered statement. Emma advises a cautious approach to avoid drawing attention to their investigation into suspicious activities and cover-ups within their organization. As the narrative shifts back to Joe, he prepares to leave the warehouse, holding onto a device he believes will provide protection. His search for the secret organization leads him to various locations, but he finds them all abandoned. His journey filled with determination, but lacking in discoveries. After several days of travel, it was on one evening that Joe found himself seated in a bar. During this time, the entrance of 2 sheriffs was noted, causing a noticeable shift in the bartender's demeanor, as he was aware of their usual purpose of collecting money. Upon receiving the month's share, which was deemed insufficient, one of the sheriffs resorted to violence. Meanwhile, Joe caught the attention of the other sheriff, who proceeded to insinuate Joe's involvement in the recent surge of motorbike thefts in the vicinity. Questioning him about it, Joe's lack of response led to a demand for his license. Ignoring the sheriff a second time prompted an attack from him, only for the sheriff to find himself overpowered by Joe, who incapacitated him with a swift move and a single punch. Joe, having left a substantial amount of money on the table, attempted to depart, only to be ambushed from behind by the other sheriff wielding a baton. Skillfully dodging the assault, Joe prepared to retaliate with a punch that, although halted mere inches from the sheriff's face, exerted enough force to send him reeling. The generous tip left behind hinted at Joe's anticipation of potential damages incurred during the encounter. Simultaneously, at the FBI headquarters, Mike was caught in a state of restlessness due to inactivity. While Emma was preoccupied with video games, Emma's reminder about criminals venturing into virtual reality for their dealings underscored the necessity for them to stay abreast with technological advancements. The monotony was broken by a call from Joe to Mike, prompting Mike to signal Emma to trace the call after playfully getting her attention. Despite their efforts, Joe's precise location remained elusive, especially after Joe's abrupt end to the call and subsequent destruction of his phone. A subsequent conversation between Joe and Mike led to arrangements for a meeting at a Chinese restaurant, with Joe's exact whereabouts still a mystery. Joe's exploration of the city the following day coincided with an advertisement for Auza technology. His observance of the meeting location from a distance was soon followed by his arrival at the restaurant, where the owner, upon noticing Joe's attire, cautioned Miki about potential damages. Despite Miki's request for Joe to reveal his face, Joe showed no interest in prolonging their interaction. However, a conversation ensued, with Mike warning Joe of the risks of being recognized. The dialogue quickly shifted to the subject of a serial murder case, with Joe seeking information and Mike proposing an exchange of answers for leads. The situation escalated when Mike, feigning misunderstanding, brandished a gun at Joe, demanding details about an incident at a hospital. This tense moment was momentarily interrupted by consecutive disturbances from Auza Eats delivery boys, culminating in an attack on Joe by one of them wielding extendable machetes. Despite the chaos, Joe managed to fend off the attacker, revealing his identity as Logan through the use of a device after a dramatic showdown that included ninja-like combat and the use of flaming swords against multiple adversaries. The aftermath of the confrontation left Mike in disbelief, having only heard legends of ninjas. The encounter's intensity was further amplified by an attack from the enemy, prompting Joe and Mike to seek cover. The swift departure of the assailants left Mike to ponder the extraordinary durability of the weapons used, while Joe and Mike found themselves momentarily aligned in their focus on an Auza advertisement, each harboring their thoughts. Back at the headquarters of a secret clan, the revelation of Joe's survival brought displeasure to the master.